Imagine being trapped with the one person you trust the most, a figure who embodies safety, love, and protection. Picture yourself enveloped in the warmth of familiarity, believing every reassuring word, every gentle touch is a shield against the world's cruelties. Now, imagine the gut-wrenching moment when that sanctuary morphs into a nightmarish prison. Instantly, the sanctuary becomes a facade, and the protector transforms into the predator. This is the chilling true crime case of Sarah Thompson, a vibrant young girl, full of dreams stretching far beyond the small town she called home. Just 14 years old, Sarah's laughter echoed down the hallways, her hopes shimmering brightly for a future that seemed as boundless as the sky above. She was cherished, almost idolized, especially by her uncle, a man she had known her entire life, a man who had always been her confidant, her teacher, her guiding star. Her mother, though present, played a complex role in the family dynamic, often caught between the protective instincts of a guardian and the pressures of daily life. There were moments when Sarah sought her mother's reassurance, hoping for the kind of connection that would help her navigate her fears, but communication often faltered. The subtle rifts left Sarah feeling isolated, caught in a world where comfort coexisted with unease. Yet, what lay beneath the surface raised a haunting question. Were there early warning signs? Teachers, friends, and even neighbors would later reflect on suspicions they'd brushed aside. Comments about Sarah's hesitations, her haunted eyes during class, and her reluctance to engage outside the warmth of family ties began to stack up like bricks in a wall, each one a testament to the growing dread that few dared to voice. But beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic life lay dark undercurrents that would soon spiral out of control. Sarah believed she had the ultimate safeguard, her father's unwavering support, his promises to always watch over her. Every hug he gave felt like an invisible cloak, protecting her from the harsh realities of the world. On a quiet summer night, the shifting shadows revealed an earth-shattering truth. The very person tasked with nurturing her dreams became the author of her darkest nightmare. In a harrowing turn of events, innocence shattered and trust was redefined. The line dividing love and betrayal became perilously thin as Sarah faced an unimaginable horror. Her life, once a canvas of potential, now smeared with betrayal and violence. In the chilling investigation that followed, the community grappled with the unsettling realizations about the man they thought they knew, as secrets began to unravel like threads from a torn tapestry. How could love morph into monstrosity in an instant? How could the protector become the executioner in what felt like a heartbeat? Join us as we delve into this tragic and twisted tale, a narrative woven with trust, betrayal, and the grimmest of truths. We will uncover the complexities of human nature, the shadowy intersections of loyalty and malice, and the devastating aftermath of a crime that rippled through a community, leaving scars that would last forever. This is not just a story about a young girl's untimely end. This is a desperate exploration of the darkness that sometimes lies within those we hold dearest. Welcome to the painful reality of Sarah Thompson's case, a reminder that the ones we think we know the best could, in the blink of an eye, become our greatest danger. As we step into the shadows of Sarah Thompson's tragic story, we shine a stark light on the central figure of her nightmare, her father. To those outside the family, he was just another face in the community, a seemingly ordinary man who wore a mask of respectability. But beneath that facade lay the frightening truth of a dark past just waiting to be uncovered. His early life was a tapestry woven with threads of instability and turmoil. Reports suggest that he grew up in a volatile home, marked by moments of both love and danger. As a child, he was exposed to a chaotic environment. There were whispers of substance abuse and violence echoing through the walls of his childhood home. It raised the question, was he always destined to become the monster he ultimately became? Or did something in his life trigger his descent into darkness? While some may argue he showed signs of aggression early on, it was a gradual transformation that spiraled out of control. Friends and neighbors occasionally noted his quick temper and sharp words that could cut deeper than any physical blow. Had they chosen to look closer, they might have spotted the red flags: unexplained bruises on his early childhood playmates, an unsettling fascination with control, instances where he manipulated those around him. But to most, he was just a little rough around the edges, and so those signs were brushed aside. His criminal history tells a troubling tale. There were minor run-ins with the law in his youth, disorderly conduct, driving under the influence, but nothing that would have alerted the authorities to the infusing storm within him. As a father, he initially played the role perfectly, attending parent-teacher meetings and volunteering for community events, projecting an image of normalcy. Yet, behind closed doors, the facade began to crack. As Sarah approached her teenage years, stories began to surface about fights at local bars, confrontations that unveiled a disturbing pattern. Those who crossed him found themselves afraid. His history of violent outbursts became a chilling backdrop to the growing concern among family and friends. He was always able to charm his way back into their good graces, using a mixture of guilt and aggression to manipulate sympathy. The community, largely unaware, continued to see him as an upstanding member, the caring dad who would always protect his family. But with Sarah, the relationship was far more insidious. Evidence of prior abuse would later emerge in fragments, small, unconnected truths drawn together like a jigsaw puzzle to reveal the depravity hidden in plain sight. There were times when Sarah would show signs of discomfort around her father, little gestures that could easily be chalked up to typical teenage moodiness. But each sigh, each wince at a sarcastic comment, sketched a larger picture of a web of psychological intimidation and control. Her father was a master manipulator, convincing others of his benign intentions while wielding a fist of iron within the walls of their home. Friends who visited their house would later recount strange moments, times when Sarah seemed to shrink away from a heavy hand, her laughter silenced under the oppressive presence of her father's gaze. He played the perfect role, the responsible provider during family outings, the indulgent father who doted on Sarah when visitors were around. But behind the closed doors, dark currents infiltrated their home, and the playful father persona faded, replaced by someone who ruled not with love, but with fear. Those closest to her, including Sarah's classmates and teachers, could only sense something amiss, a feeling that something deeper lurked beneath the surface. Yet, to outward appearances, he was welcomed into homes, shared meals, and became involved in school activities. The whispers of abuse were often drowned out by laughter and the clink of glasses. The haunting echoes of those who felt something was wrong were muted, as no one wanted to believe that a father could inflict terror on his own child. As evidence began to surface posthumously, the tragic reality unfolded with profound implications. In hindsight, violent incidents, deep-rooted manipulation, and an omnipresent sense of control over Sarah crystallized into a harrowing narrative. He had carefully groomed an environment of obedience, creating a rift between Sarah and her support systems. Friends who once trusted her father were left in shock, grappling with the knowledge that the cheerful man they saw was nothing but a facade, one that hid the malevolent darkness behind it. As investigators peeled back the layers of Sarah's life, painstakingly collecting testimonies and revealing the raw wounds of neglect and abuse, the disturbing portrait of her father emerged completely. He had wielded his influence like a weapon, meticulously crafting a reputation that allowed him to escape the judgment his actions deserved. The horror of Sarah's story was compounded by the knowledge that she had been utterly trapped within the heart of her family. Her father, the very person who was meant to protect her, embracing the role of a wolf in sheep's clothing. As we delve into the night of horror that shattered Sarah Thompson's life, we must first examine the last known moments of a vibrant young girl before she vanished into darkness. It was a seemingly ordinary day in the small town where Sarah lived, a late summer evening infused with the promise of freedom that only teenagers cherish. She had spent the day with friends, laughing, sharing secrets, and dreaming of the future, not knowing that ominous clouds were gathering around her. The last confirmed sighting of Sarah was around 7 p.m. at the local park, where she enjoyed a brief reprieve from the pressures of school and home. Friends recounted that she seemed her usual self, full of spirit and unburdened by the complexities woven into her existence. They parted ways, promising to meet again the next day, blissfully unaware of the impending catastrophe. Just hours before the shadows descended, Sarah had returned home, greeted by the familiar sounds of her family. Her father was present, along with her mother, and at first glance everything appeared as it should. However, underneath that semblance of normality lay a menacing tension, a creeping dread that would soon suffocate any sense of safety she possessed. In the moments leading up to her vanishing, Sarah's interactions with her father painted a foreboding picture. It was evident that he was increasingly controlling, lashing out defensively over minor issues. As the evening progressed, he called her into his study under the guise of wanting to help her with a school project. Sarah, though feeling a hint of unease, felt obligated to comply. She believed, perhaps naively, that this was just another moment of bonding. But this invitation concealed a darker intent. Once inside the room, he concealed himself behind a mask of paternal affection, radiating a sense of authority that left no room for dissent. The door clicked shut and the air thickened with tension. What transpired next is a chilling account, unfolding in a grim timeline, a carefully orchestrated attack veiled in the guise of a family interaction that warped into a terrifying reality. At approximately 7:30 p.m., the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Her father's demeanor darkened, and in a matter of moments, the carefully constructed facade of love disintegrated. Accusations flew, words turned cruel, and an ordinary disagreement ascended violently. Sarah, sensing the abrupt change, felt an icy grip of terror as she realized she was alone with the very man who was supposed to keep her safe. In that moment, desperation ignited within her. Did she make attempts to escape? Those who would come to investigate later would discover scattered fragments of her bravery. She tried to turn the doorknob, but it was locked, an unyielding barrier standing between her and freedom. Screams erupted, echoes of a struggle that reverberated within the walls of her home, but they fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the distance of familial bliss elsewhere. As the horrifying final moments unfolded, it became disturbingly clear that Sarah was fighting for her life. Evidence later revealed could paint a portrait of terror. The overturned furniture, the sheer force of a struggle present in the very fabric of the room. There were marks on the floor that told tales of frantic movement, the remnants of a desperate fight against the father who had turned into the monster she feared. Amidst the chaos, neighbors might have heard muffled cries, an unsettling sound that would haunt them for years to come. In hindsight, there were moments when performed normalcy abruptly gave way to panic, buried within an otherwise quiet night in a suburban neighborhood. Yet still, no one intervened. When the dust settled, the world outside continued unabated, unaware of the horror that had transpired behind closed doors. Time dragged on, and it seemed as if Sarah had simply vanished into thin air. Hours ticked by, and by 11 p.m., concern began to bloom in the hearts of her family as they realized she hadn't returned from her father's study. As they frantically searched the house, calling out for her in growing distress, its winds began to howl outside, swallowing their voices in a chilling embrace. The clock struck midnight, marking not only the onset of a new day, but also the irrevocable shift from uncertainty to catastrophe. Sarah was gone, and her father, the mastermind behind her anguish, sat cloaked in the remnants of his deception, the threatening reality lurking behind a disguise of concern that would soon become glaringly apparent. In the following days, the darkness of that night would deepen further as authorities were called, searches initiated, and a community left reeling in disbelief. The shadow of Sarah's absence weighed heavily on the town as frantic efforts to find her began. But in those first critical hours, the chilling truth whispered through the darkness. She was no longer the girl who had laughed in the park just hours before. She had become a tragic tale of woe. The search for Sarah Thompson quickly escalated, igniting a whirlwind of activity in the community that had once felt so secure. Volunteers poured into the Thompson household, drawn together by the shared urgency of finding the missing girl. Posters with her bright, smiling face adorned lampposts and storefronts, pleading for any information that could lead to Sarah's return. The once cheerful town soon transformed into a landscape filled with murmurs of fear and heartache as townspeople exchanged worried glances, each person hoping to hold on to the fragile thread of hope. As hours turned into days, law enforcement launched a full investigation, combing through the neighborhoods, questioning friends, and diving deep into the complex web of family dynamics that had led Sarah to this perilous night. Her father, appearing to embody the role of the distraught parent, was quick to distance himself from suspicion. With tears in his eyes and a trembling voice, he recounted his concern, pleading for the community's help as he painted a vivid picture of a loving father, lost in the chaos of a missing child. Yet suspicion lay like a fog over his every word. But right beneath the surface, a storm was distilling, a wave of unease bubbling in the depths of the investigation as experienced detectives began to connect the dots. Questions were raised surrounding Sarah's father. Could he indeed be the very monster that had taken her? Friends and relatives were interviewed, revealing snippets of discomfort, long-buried stories that unraveled the carefully crafted image of a family man. As the investigation deepened, the haunting reality of Sarah's final moments became clearer, pieced together through forensic analysis. Evidence recovered from her father's study unveiled a devastating truth. There were traces of violence that spoke volumes of the struggle that had taken place. Blood spatter, hairs, and fabric fibers collected from the scene would prove vital, as forensic experts meticulously reconstructed the shattered moments meant to be filled with comfort. The investigation team found something chilling. The likely timeline leading up to Sarah's disappearance began to emerge in stark detail. When Sarah first became isolated, her father's method of manipulation had escalated to violence, ensuring she was physically and emotionally trapped. A timeline of events revealed that he had not only lured her into that darkened space, but had also devised a plan that would conceal his crimes from the watchful eyes of the world outside. With interviews revealing deeper insights into their relationship, the shocking memories from family members surfaced. The earlier accusations of verbal abuse, the uncomfortable silences during family gatherings, and the underlying tensions that lay beneath. One friend recounted a chilling conversation they had shared, where Sarah expressed vague discomfort, words she struggled to articulate, that now echoed like rumbles of thunder in the darkness. "He can be so intense sometimes. You just don't know how to make him happy." For the investigators, this pattern began to weave a picture of a deeply troubled mind, capable of unspeakable acts, the desire for total control coming to a voracious culmination in that dreadful night of horror. As the investigation progressed, evidence from neighbors and electronic devices, cell phones, computers, provided conflicting accounts, revealing more questions than answers. As they sifted through logs of Sarah's social media interactions, it became painfully clear that she had been carefully distancing herself from interactions with her father leading up to her disappearance. Text messages conveyed frustration and anxiety, revealing anxious attempts to seek solace from friends, messages that would never reach them. The heart of the investigation was now pulsing with urgency, a sense that time was running out to uncover what had truly happened that fateful night. Police scoured local areas, darting down leads while hopes flickered like candles in a storm. Amidst the shadows, however, lies the dark core of human behavior that many struggle to comprehend. As police sought answers, they turned their focus inward to Sarah's father, scrutinizing his alibis, timelines, and demeanor as they built their case. Every eye that fell upon him began whispering unspoken accusations that only seemed to grow louder as days turned into weeks. Yet he remained shrouded in an unsettling calm, a facade of grief layered over the darkest corners of his soul. It was during a late-night strategy meeting that officers made a breakthrough. A neighbor had come forward, recalling a late-night confrontation outside Sarah's home preceding her disappearance. The figure she had seen, cloaked in darkness, had spurred her instinctively to call the police, but by the time help arrived, the shadows had swallowed her screams. The community held its breath as they connected dots. The evening of Sarah's disappearance began to lay bare the stark reality of her father's monstrous impulses. As the investigation into Sarah Thompson's tragic death evolved, law enforcement's initial suspicions steadily homed in on one central figure, her father. In the days following her body's discovery, investigators worked tirelessly to rule out other potential suspects, methodically sifting through every avenue and scattering threads of evidence. Yet, a disquieting truth grew undeniable. The very person who should have been her protector was now the prime suspect. From the onset, detectives noted peculiarities in Sarah's father's behavior during his interactions with them. At first glance, he portrayed an image of grief, but as they probed deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. He oscillated between emotional outbursts and detached pronouncements, a red flag that sent ripples of concern through the investigative team. His nervousness became profound. Detectives observed him fidgeting with his hands, his eyes darting around the room as if desperately searching for refuge from the accusations swirling around him. His defensiveness grew more apparent as he began over-explaining details of his whereabouts on the night of Sarah's disappearance, offering explanations that seemed a dark contrast to the mounting evidence against him. Soon, a breakthrough in the investigation came in the form of forensic findings that would tighten the noose around Sarah's father. Evidence collected from the crime scene spoke volumes. DNA from the victim had been found mingled with traces of her father's on critical surfaces. Moreover, the signs of struggle presented an irrevocable tale of violence. Bruises witnessed on Sarah's arms were indicative of someone desperately fighting back against an aggressor. The forensic team's meticulous work not only revealed the harrowing truth, but also illustrated a violent turn that had taken place mere moments before her life was extinguished. As forensic specialists explored deeper, they uncovered vital information hidden within electronic devices. Sarah's phone records unveiled a frantic series of messages sent just hours before her last known moments. Disturbing exchanges between Sarah and her friends hinted at her fears, revealing an urgent need for help. A cry for understanding that hung in the air like the calm before a storm. Meanwhile, surveillance footage from the local area captured Sarah's movements as she navigated the town, and investigators began tracing her interactions leading up to the final tragic night. The picture formed by unraveling these texts and phone records painted an uncomfortably familiar landscape, revealing how Sarah had fought to establish boundaries, imploring friends for support, but ultimately feeling ensnared within her father's grasp. Those recordings of her pleas became powerful testaments, underscoring her struggle against an unseen enemy within her own home. As the evidence mounted, law enforcement conducted a daring maneuver. They decided to confront Sarah's father directly, leading to a tense interaction that felt electric with anticipation. The atmosphere held suffocating tension as they presented their findings, executing a calculated psychological play. They exposed the inconsistencies in his statements, confronting him with the irrefutable forensic evidence that would unravel his once mighty facade. When asked to account for the incredible details laid before him, his facade began to crack. Some observers present noted a chilling, almost eerie calm as he absorbed the gravity of the situation. He remained eerily composed, but with every revelation laid at his feet, cracks appeared in his otherwise demure exterior. The detectives could see him grappling internally, moving from blatantly defensive to attempting to offer mechanical justifications for his actions, while paradoxically avoiding the truth. Ultimately, the culmination of this carefully orchestrated approach led to a pivotal moment: the arrest. Officers moved in swiftly but with precision, handcuffing Sarah's father as the reality of his actions closed in around him. His reaction was disconcerting. He exuded an unsettling coldness that punctuated the atmosphere. While his family chased after him, heartbroken and distraught, he played the role of the victim, still trying to deflect guilt with calculated responses. In the interrogation room, detectives probed deeply, searching for any sign of remorse, any indication of breaking under the weight of his own conscience. Despite everything, he clung to the narratives he had spun, supplanting blame and attempting to overshadow the mounting evidence that painted him as the architect of this tragedy. He offered no confession, merely veering toward a defense filled with denial cloaked in anger. "I would never hurt my own child," he spat, a mantra repeated as evidence piled higher. Yet each denial felt increasingly hollow. The specter of disdain and disbelief loomed large among the detectives as they witnessed his frigid demeanor contrasted against the heart-wrenching loss that enveloped Sarah's family and friends. While Sarah had fought valiantly to escape the clutches of darkness, her father's steadfast insistence on innocence sent ripples of frustration throughout the department, becoming a focal point of rising tension. In few days, he was charged to court after several interrogations. Inside the courtroom, a tangible tension enveloped each trial day as the prosecution prepared to confront the reality of Sarah Thompson's tragic death. Their strategy was firmly rooted in methodical investigation and undeniable evidence, crafted to build a comprehensive case against her father. Prosecutors methodically outlined the timeline leading up to the night of horror, intertwining forensics, emotional testimonies, and the sad truth of Sarah's final moments among overhead projections and detailed timelines. Heartbreaking testimonies began pouring in from all corners. Friends, family, teachers, and experts depicted a beautiful girl whose laughter, dreams, and hopes became muffled echoes in the face of brutality. Sarah's mother stood steadfast, recounting the last time she saw her daughter, and painted a vivid portrait of a vibrant young girl with aspirations, now tragically extinguished. Her tears flowed freely as she narrated the pain of losing not just her child, but the impending future that had once sparkled with opportunity. Each word served as a dagger, striking at the heart of the jury, amplifying the stakes and drawing all to the emotional core of the case. Teachers testified as well, sharing memories of Sarah's joyful spirit in the classroom, her talent in art, and the concern they had felt upon sensing something was amiss within her household. The stories of youthful exuberance, juxtaposed with the darkness encroaching upon her life, wove a somber narrative that shed light on the effects of domestic violence, a reality that the community now recognized. Expert witnesses offered psychological insights into the dynamics of abusive relationships, illustrating the emotional manipulation that had woven a grip too tight for Sarah to escape. Meanwhile, her father's defense strategy emerged, shifting from outright denial to a more disturbing play, attempting to navigate the complex waters of an insanity plea. His attorney claimed that Sarah's father had been battling profound mental strain, and their argument tried to frame him more as a tragic figure overcome by hardship than a villain. They portrayed him as a victim of circumstances, casting doubt on his mental state at the time of Sarah's death. It became a chilling game of misdirection, attempting to blame a system that had failed him rather than confronting his actions directly. As the trial progressed, key moments emerged that turned the narrative on its head. Shockwaves reverberated when forensic psychologists dissected Sarah's father's psyche. Was he a sadist, reveling in control, a sociopath devoid of empathy, or simply a broken man overwhelmed by his demons? Testimonies delved into his past behaviors, revealing the troubling patterns of emotional abuse that became a hallmark of his influence. Yet they spoke little to the tragedy inflicted on his innocent daughter. The courtroom fell silent as one forensic expert soberly noted, "He exhibited patterns consistent with sociopathic tendencies, demonstrating a profound inability to form genuine emotional connections and a penchant for manipulation." The chilling exploration into his mind left many shaken, presenting a darkness that lay not just in his actions, but in the very fabric of his being, a void where humanity should have thrived. The unexpected revelations left the jury grappling with the question of accountability versus mental illness, complicating the perception of justice against a haunting backdrop of tragic loss. As the trial approached its conclusion, the public became increasingly fixated on the proceedings. The local community banded together, rallying behind Sarah's memory and lending support to her family. Candlelight vigils and rallies underscored a desperate plea for justice, resonating far beyond the courtroom walls. Social media buzzed with thoughtful discussions surrounding domestic violence, driving home the truth that Sarah's story was not merely an isolated incident. It was a reflection of a pervasive issue that demanded resolution. Then came the climactic moment, the verdict. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with heavy hearts. The courtroom held its breath as the foreperson declared, "We find the defendant guilty of all charges." A collective gasp resonated, tempered only by the bitter taste of relief flooding through Sarah's family and supporters. The verdict echoed in the hearts of many, signifying that justice had prevailed, if only partially, in Sarah's name. But the question of sentencing still loomed. Would her father be held accountable for the depth of his crime? The courtroom filled with a mixed aura of anticipation and anxiety as the judge delivered the sentence. He received life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision that left no room for further mischief with the law, a measure aimed at ensuring he could never harm another child. Public reaction swelled in gratitude for a legal system, relished in its ability to protect. But the darkness still lingered. For Sarah's family, the sentence provided a semblance of closure, yet the wounds of grief remained open, raw from the loss of a beloved daughter. Reactions poured in from the community, who felt a profound sense of relief, but also an overwhelming sorrow, the weight of Sarah's absence too great to bear easily. As we conclude this powerful exploration of Sarah Thompson's tragic story, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this case? How can we, as a community, better protect vulnerable children and support those who may be suffering in silence? Let's discuss in the comments below, sharing your insights, experiences, and ideas for how we can foster a safer environment for everyone. If you found this story impactful and wish to hear more cases that need to be told, stories that echo the importance of awareness, justice, and protection, please like and subscribe. By joining our community, you are contributing to an ongoing dialogue that ensures these vital issues remain at the forefront of our conversations. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you for being part of this journey, and let's continue to raise our voices for those who need us most.